Good afternoon, everybody. Please, could you do me a small favour and just type yes into the question box if you can hear me, please? Okay. It looks like we're having a few responses coming in, so that looks positive. Good old technology. So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jo Nockels, and I'm a qualified accountant working for Tax Assist Accountants. Here's a terrible picture of me, and more importantly, here's the details of our social media profile. So if you're enjoying this afternoon session, please feel free to tell the world about it. Now, before we get started, I'm afraid I've got to display this rather ugly slide, which is a disclaimer, but it's obviously just here to protect you and us. And essentially, it says, please don't act on anything you hear today unless you seek professional advice. So if we could just take a moment to read through that slide, please. Thank you. Okay, so here's the agenda. This is what I'm intending to cover. So who's affected by making tax digital? When do the changes occur? What's actually changing? And you can see that I've picked out a few things there. Now, although making tax digital as concept is fairly simple, there's just the odd bit that we need to spend a little bit more time getting our heads around. So I've picked those out there. And before I start looking at the questions, I thought we'd wrap up with a session on dispelling some of the myths surrounding MTD. So speaking of questions, do please feel free to ask your questions whilst I'm speaking. You should have a question panel that looks something like the slide that you're seeing right now. If you manage to endure my webinar until the end, I'll try and answer the questions then. But as I say, please feel free to send them over as they crop up. Now, I don't want to discourage questions, absolutely far from it, but please could we just try and keep the questions fairly general, not too specific or personal, because as I'm sure you can appreciate, it's going to be pretty difficult for me to comment without knowing the full extent of your affairs. Okay. Okay, so without further ado, let's get cracking. So just really quickly to set the scene, what's actually behind making tax digital? HMRC have got plans for the UK to be one of the most digitally advanced systems in the whole world. And the reason behind this is that they believe it's going to close the tax gap. Okay, so they're working towards this digital exchange of information, and they think it's going to close that tax gap. And the tax gap is the difference between the tax that should have been paid to HMRC and the actual amount that's been paid. Now, longer term, we might see other taxes being reported under making tax digital. And indeed, there is a roadmap for making tax digital, but it's changed quite a bit since it sort of first hit the headlines back in 2015. But right now, this is what we know. Okay, so from April 2019, it's the turn of VAT. And then really, for everything else, the revenue have said not until April 2020, at the earliest, essentially. So we don't really have any visibility on when the other taxes are going to come on board, but we know that they do have a desire to add them eventually. Okay, so just a bit of housekeeping before I get started. What I'll probably do is abbreviate making tax digital to MTD. So, but please just assume that if I do drop MTD in, I'm referring to making tax digital for VAT unless I specifically say so. Okay, so who does MTD apply to? Okay, two things here. It applies to VAT-registered businesses currently with a turnover in excess of the VAT threshold, VAT registration threshold, and that currently sits at 85,000. And unusually, we know that it's under current plans, it's going to be held at 85,000 until March 2022. Okay, so VAT-registered businesses and looking at that turnover test. Now, for those VAT-registered businesses with turnover below 85,000, Making Tax Digital is not going to apply. Okay, so you don't need to operate MTD. And just a word of warning, once you fall within the scope of Making Tax Digital, once you're in, you're in. Okay, so for example, if your turnover is at 100,000 and so therefore you're forced to comply with MTD, but then subsequently a year later it's dropped back down to 60,000, you're actually stuck within MTD unless you deregister from VAT altogether. Okay. And this once you're in issue also applies if, for example, you joined the MTD pilot, which is currently running at the moment. So perhaps you're looking to join early into MTD, or you want to voluntarily register for MTD. Okay, so you must be aware that if you make that early step or that voluntary step, that once you sign up for MTD, the only way to come out of it is to deregister from VAT altogether. Okay. So perhaps you're thinking, Joe, is there any way out of this? There are some exemptions from MTD for VAT, but they are pretty niche. Okay, so let's just stop and look at this slide. So businesses run entirely by practicing members of a religious society. Okay, and the second bullet point, where it's not reasonably practical to use digital tools for reasons of age, disability, geography, So it's not impossible to be exempt from VAT, from MTD for that, but the onus, from what we've seen so far, the onus is definitely on the business payer to sort of prove why they're worthy of this exemption. And at the moment, there's not actually a sort of formal process to apply for this exemption. And HMRC have recognised that this is a bit of a shortcoming. They are looking to address it, but at the moment we haven't seen any movement there yet. And just to put this into some context, we actually did a Freedom of Information request at the end of last year, just to see how many businesses are currently exempt from online filing for VAT. And it turned out that there were only 4,000. So if you're looking, or if you're hoping to be eligible for one of these exemptions, you probably need to look at this much more closely than you think. Okay. So that was who MTD applies to. Now let's look at when it applies then. So it's going to apply to VAT periods starting after the 1st of April 2019. So to put that another way, your entire VAT period needs to start after the 1st of April. So if you've got a VAT period that straddles the 1st of April, then it's not going to be an MTD VAT return. You're going to have to, you'll wait until that next VAT return that starts after the 1st of April. Okay. Now, there are a group of businesses that have a 6-month extension, but they are pretty unusual with the sort of businesses that we deal with. So annual VAT returns, VAT groups, trusts, etc. Okay, so we know who MTD applies to now, and we know when it applies, but what's actually changing about VAT? So first off, it's probably important to look at what's not changing. Okay, so under MTD, we're still going to be filing just those same 9 boxes of information, okay, that we currently see on the VAT return. And consequently, the VAT periods, the deadlines for returns and for payments are going to remain unchanged. Okay. And just to stress, contrary to popular belief, you're not going to be sending your transactional data. So they're only going to see those same summary 9 boxes. They're not going to see the figures that make those up. Okay, not at this stage, you know. Okay, and the 2 main changes that we're going to see then is 1, the digital record keeping requirement. So you're going to need to keep your records in a digital format. And secondly, you're going to have to submit those VAT returns via functional compatible software. And what I mean by that is we can no longer, if you're mandated by MTD, you can no longer log into the Revenue's website, the government gateway, and punch in those 9 boxes. You're going to have to submit the VAT return via some sort of software. Okay. The reason for this is that the Revenue are looking to reduce the risk of human error when figures are being taken from one piece of software to another. So they want information to be exchanged digitally. So let's just look at those 2 points then a bit more closely. So looking at digital record keeping. So we need to, first of all, record each sale and purchase digitally. Okay. Now, let's just stop and take in that statement. For some businesses, that's going to be a huge change because perhaps, you know, they're writing up their records by hand, or perhaps they've been entering statement totals or something from suppliers. Okay. And that second bullet point then, I just wanted to stress that the actual invoice itself doesn't need to be kept in digital format. It's just the information that's on that invoice that needs to be kept digitally. Okay, the actual invoice itself doesn't need to be. Now, if you're one of those that are into, you know, snapping pictures of your receipts, or you're scanning them in, or you're keeping your PDFs, that's absolutely great. You know, and you can destroy the original paper copy if you want to, but it's not a specific requirement of MTD. Okay, now, of course, you do need to keep your records. I'm not saying that you don't, but the Revenue don't actually stipulate that they must be kept digitally. Okay, so paper copies are fine if that's what you'd rather. Now, just in terms of the information that's got to be documented then, I don't think there's any surprises here, but perhaps one slight change from what you've been used to in the past is that rate of VAT that's charged on your sales. You've perhaps just been used to capturing the amount of VAT on your raised on your sales invoices rather than the rate. So perhaps a bit of a change there for some business owners. Okay, so let's just stop and apply what we've just been hearing then to a few situations. So looking at handwritten records, first of all, they really can't continue in their current guise. Someone or something is going to need to digitize them, you know, whether that's yourself or your bookkeeper, your accountant, or a really, really nifty bit of software, someone has got to digitize them. And even if you're a software user, there might still be a change to how you've been used to working. You know, as I said before, perhaps you've been entering statement totals in, you know, or you're taking totals from another piece of kit, you know, a spreadsheet or something held outside of your software. You know, we can't do that anymore. It either needs to be recorded digitally, or there's got to be digital links in there, which I'm going to go through in just a moment. Now, there are a very small number of exceptions to this digital record keeping requirement. So if you have staff and they've got expense claims, they could be entered as a batch total. If you're on a flat rate scheme, you don't need to keep a digital record of all your purchases. If you're on these schemes, by the way, or you know, they should ring a bell with you and they'll mean something to you. But that one there about the retail scheme, now I just want to pick on that just for a sec, because you might be using a retail scheme without even knowing. Okay, so retail schemes are basically in place where you're talking really large volumes of transactions. Obviously, it's a retail business and it's just really rather difficult to do normal VAT reporting. And so consequently, what we tend to see is that you're using the till rolls, for example, as the sort of basis of your VAT records. So, you know, at the point that the product is sold, either the salesperson or perhaps you've got a fancy scanner and that sort of identifies what VAT rate is applicable to that item. And at the end of the day, you get your till roll totals and you pop those into your software and it figures out what VAT rates apply. Okay, now that sort of situation is allowed to continue under MTD. So a few things here. We don't have to have a link between your till system if you do have a sophisticated sort of EPOS type system and your bookkeeping product. That doesn't need to be a digital link. Okay, so you can just take till rolls, physical till rolls, and just key those in. And we're not having to record the transactions individually. You're taking summary totals. Okay. Again, there are some exclusions here regarding just adjustments this time rather than sort of, you know, whole-scale business situations. So partially exempt adjustments, corrections, fuel scale charge, flat rate scheme. So you'll be keying in the adjustment digitally into the software, but the calculation that you've used to arrive at that figure doesn't need to be recorded digitally. Perhaps that's, you know, on a spreadsheet held outside or a handwritten record. Okay, so let's have a look at what at this term, functional compatible software. Now, I'd just like to launch a poll if I can. Let's see if I manage not to break the system. Here we go. Looks like we are collecting responses. Look at that. Not bad for an afternoon. We're up to about 70% voted now, so that's good. I'll just hold it for a little bit longer. Excellent. Okay, I've had 86% of you voted. So let's have a look at the results. Wow. Okay. So in terms of the bookkeeping systems that we're currently using, then big bias towards spreadsheets, and good to see a lot of you using software as well. Great. Okay. That's been really useful. Thank you. Okay. Right, this is going to be of interest then. Okay, so with regards to software, it's got to be able to submit the VAT return directly with HMRC. Okay. It could be a number of pieces of software, it could just be one, but if you've got more than one piece of software, it's got to be digitally linked. Okay, and we're going to cover this. You might have noticed on our agenda, we've got some specific slides just on digital links, so I'm going to pick up on that later. Okay, but quite key. Just word of just an advisory. The software is also going to house within there some information that's going to be shared with HMRC. I don't think there's any surprises on there, is there? Now, if you're unsure about whether your software is going to comply with MTD, the Revenue have got a list of software houses that they've been working with, and they have, you know, sort of approved that they are compatible with MTD. So, first of all, I'd visit that website and make that link and make sure that your software is appearing on there if you are currently using software. If you're still not sure, perhaps speak to the software house, and indeed they may have already been in touch with you to let you know. Okay, so the digital links then, so this will be of interest then, this section, to firstly spreadsheet users and also those that said that they were using more than one piece of software. Okay, so where you've got more than one piece, we talk about this digital link. Okay, so we want that exchange of information digitally without too much human intervention. Okay, the revenue have actually given some examples, and I've put those on the slide there, and some of them may surprise you. So even just emailing a file is regarded as a digital link. Okay. What they've specifically says doesn't constitute a digital link is copying and pasting or cutting and pasting. Okay. Okay, now the revenue have given us a bit of a reprieve here because they've allowed for what they've called a soft landing period. So for the first 12 months, just to allow businesses more time to adapt and prepare, they are relaxing the requirement for digital links. And during that time, copy and paste will be allowed. Okay, so I sort of started this section by saying, yeah, digital links have to be in place, but then comes along this soft landing, and then there's a further but, because to that soft landing there are some exclusions, and here they talk about mandatory digital links, and by mandatory I mean that the soft landing period doesn't apply to these sort of circumstances ever. Okay, so data must always be exchanged digitally. Okay. Now, the main example that we see of where mandatory digital links are a requirement throughout surrounds what we call bridging software. Okay, so sometimes, let's draw an example here. Sometimes a business may be totally wed to their system and their program, and it meets the digital record keeping requirement, so that's a tick, but it cannot submit the VAT returns to HMRC. So in these cases, bridging software is brought in to make that non-compliant piece of software have the ability to file with HMRC. So it sort of ensures that obsolete piece of kit can continue, and is MTD compliant. Okay, and that's great. But if you're using bridging software, this is the instance where that digital link is mandatory in all cases. Okay, that soft landing period never ever applies to these mandatory digital link situations. Okay. Now, if you have got a particularly complicated bookkeeping system and process, and you've got information feeding in from multiple areas, the revenue have got some more examples of where digital links are mandatory, and not, and they've actually put some images around that. So it'd probably be worthwhile looking through that on their website. Okay. So this is the sort of situation we were talking about. So spreadsheet going into bridging software, and then the bridging software submits the VAT return to HMRC. And in this situation, that link between the spreadsheet and the bridging software has to be digital throughout. And what I mean by that is that you're probably going to be taking that spreadsheet and importing it into the bridging software. Okay, so there's no kind of keying in figures or anything like that. Okay. Now, I touched on handwritten records and we touched on software users. So let's just have a closer look at spreadsheet users then. So spreadsheets can continue because they do meet that digital record keeping requirement, but you're very likely to need some bridging software because the number of spreadsheets that are actually capable of submitting direct to HMRC are few and far between. And if you're using spreadsheets, you must still make sure that you're recording each transaction, unless you're on a retail scheme, as we've said before, and that you're recording that correct information. So you saw on my slide that perhaps you're going to have to start recording the VAT rate on your sales invoices, which is perhaps something you've not been doing in the past. Okay. And what you're probably going to end up with is spreadsheet summarizing your sales, spreadsheet summarizing your purchases, and then you'll put in a summary tab that will capture the information for those 9 boxes, and that's what's going to sort of be imported into your bridging software. And all of those sheets are all going to be linked via formulas, no keying in data. Okay, so we're on the home stretch, folks. So before we play true or false and look at those myths, let's just take stock and jot down what we need to do in order to prepare for making tax digital. So first of all, you obviously ought to decide whether making tax digital is going to apply to you. So are you in that VAT registered group, and what's your turnover? Okay. If it does apply, then when is it going to apply? Are you going to be on from that 1st of April, which is, on the whole, is going to be the date that most people move over to MTD, or are you in that deferred group of the 1st of October? Decide which VAT return it's going to apply to. Okay, so we talked about VAT returns commencing after the 1st of April. And then just make sure that you're happy with your VAT return deadlines and due dates for payments and things like that. Okay. And then look at what's around. So is your software MTD compliant? Do you need to train your team? Do changes need to be made internally? Is your accountant or bookkeeper ready? When the time does come for MTD as well, you're going to need to register with the revenue for MTD. They won't assume that MTD applies to you, and you will need to authorize your software as well. Okay. Now, even if you've been sat listening and you've decided that MTD for that probably doesn't apply to you right now, it may be worth just taking this opportunity to review your systems and question whether they're right. Are they still making your life easier? Are you still taking, are you taking advantage of the sort of software that's out there these days? Because, they can do some pretty amazing things. Okay, so just a couple of comments that I've heard from, on the scene. So first of all, handwritten records are not allowed under MTD for VAT. Okay, so that is true. Mandated businesses are going to have to digitize their records, as we've said. So either someone has got to sit down and key it into some software or something, or your bookkeeper or your accountant, someone has to digitize them. Okay. Spreadsheets are not allowed under MTD for VAT. Okay, so we just touched on this, so that's actually false. Spreadsheets can continue in existence, but it's unlikely that you're going to be able to use spreadsheets on their own. You're probably going to have to also rely on a piece of bridging software to bridge that gap between the spreadsheet and the revenue. This is a good one. The soft landing period covers all the penalties, so I don't need to worry about MTD for that for 12 months. So that is absolutely false, and it's absolutely critical that we get this right. The soft landing period doesn't offer protection from all the penalties. It just allows you a bit of reprieve from those digital links. Okay, so you can do your copy and paste for another 12 months. Okay. And I'm pretty much there. I just wanted to talk briefly about what we do at Tax Assist. So we're currently partnered with QuickBooks Online, and they are a feature on the revenues list of MTD compliant software. We also use TaxCalc for our bridging software. So, if you are using spreadsheets and you'd like to stick with your spreadsheets, we would be in a position to help you file that with the revenue. And I mentioned it earlier, if you like capturing your receipts on your smartphone when you're out and about and then ditching that paper, we're using Receipt Bank with our clients. So you can sort of get free of that paperwork shackle. If you're not currently a client of Tax Assist, do please feel free to give us a call on our free phone 0800 number, or pop in to your local Tax Assist accountant. We offer free, no obligation consultation. And that's me done. So let's have a look and see if we've got any questions. Yes, we have a few. Wow, that's a good result. Okay, so okay, so we've had a question in. This is about what constitutes taxable turnover. So would businesses with turnover over 85,000 but only exempt or zero rated income still have to use MTD? Now it's when we talk about taxable turnover, that is everything but exempt income. So that zero rated income would be regarded as taxable turnover. So I don't know what extent your zero rated income is, but that would be included within that turnover test. Someone's asked for a copy of the slides. I'm sure we can organise that. How long do you anticipate before transactional level data becomes a requirement? I think we're way off that yet. Until we start to see other taxes come on board, I don't think we're going to see transactional data coming through. That's quite a specific one. I think I'll leave that, and perhaps we'll pick that up with you one-to-one. Someone said, if I provide Tax Assist with my spreadsheet, will they be able to manage the bridging to HMRC? Yes, as you've just heard, we're equipped for that. So we're using TaxCalc. So yeah, be more than happy to take care of that. Sorry, folks, just reading through all your questions here. That's quite a specific one. How does one register? Will this be done from the 1st of April 19 through HMRC Gov portal? Yeah, let's just be careful with our terminology there. But yeah, it will be done through the Revenue's website. Registration. As I said, they will not assume that MTD applies to you, even if historically you've had turnover in excess of 85,000. That you have to notify them that you'll be using MTD. Someone's asked if a particular product is compatible. As I said, I'd go back and check that link that I shared on the Revenue's website, because that puts it beyond doubt. And if you've still got question marks, because I know some software houses have multiple versions, speak to your software house, and hopefully they'll be able to confirm in writing. Yes, someone's asked for clarification. Do we need to digitize receipts and invoices, i.e. a photo or PDF, or just capture the values? It's that last part. You just have to capture the information. Okay, you do not need to store a photo or a PDF of the receipt digitally. Okay, it's a nice to have, but it's not a revenue requirement. Okay, so you can make the decision there about what's right. That's a good one. So I tried to register on the Revenue website, but it says it's just for a pilot. Yes, indeed it will be. Until the 1st of April, it's just a pilot. So you are voluntarily registering early, effectively. Okay. And as I said before, if you are going to go for the pilot, just be alive to the fact that once you're in, you're in. Okay. And it's rather difficult, nigh on impossible to get out unless you do register for VAT altogether. Okay. My question box just jumped about. Apologies. Now, there are a few specific questions in there, so apologies if I haven't answered your questions. What I'll try and do is perhaps pick up with you on a one-to-one basis. But I think that I have just about answered everybody's questions. So I'll just hang on the line for a couple more minutes. I've really enjoyed today's session. Thanks very much for staying on the line, everybody. Great. Okay, I'm getting lots of thanks and people are drifting off. So I'll call it a day, folks. Thanks very much, and we'll be in touch. Thank you.